Hello, and welcome to episode 85 of the Sci-Fi Podcast. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I'm Nick Zoutra. On today's podcast, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Manuela Fernández Pinto, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy and the Center for Applied Ethics at Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá, Colombia. Manuela's research aims at identifying and evaluating the epistemic and social consequences of commercially driven research today, particularly in clinical research conducted by the pharmaceutical industry. She's also an affiliated researcher at the TINT Center for the Philosophy of the Social Sciences at the University of Helsinki. She received her PhD in the History and Philosophy of Science from the University of Notre Dame in 2014. In her dissertation, Learning from Ignorance, Agnotology's Challenge to Philosophy of Science, she examined the recent literature on the social construction of ignorance in cases of commercialized and privatized scientific research, such as the tobacco industry's support of cancer research, and provided a philosophical analysis of the epistemic and social consequences that follow from such studies. Her research interests include social epistemology, the science and values debate, the history and philosophy of economics, and feminist philosophy of science. And thus, without further ado, let's bring in Manuela. Dr. Manuela Fernández Pinto, welcome to the Sci-Fi Podcast. How are you this Wednesday morning?
Hi, Nick. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm doing very well today.
Or I should say afternoon. So we spoke briefly. I was expecting to speak with hearing you're in Colombia, but you're in Germany.
Yes, I'm currently in Germany.
What's going on in Germany?
So I've been working in a couple of projects here in Germany, and I assume I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those later on.
Well, Phyllis, I guess maybe give us the general picture of So what has brought you?
So this time around, I've been here for almost a month now. So okay. I was first in Wuppertal, working with a colleague of mine, Anna Lochner. We have a project together, and this past week I've been in Hanover. I was at a conference first that was organized by some of the PhD and postdocs that they have here at the Institute for Philosophy in Hanover. And I also have a project here with Thorsten Wilholt and Jamie Shaw. And so, I'm doing Wonderful. Some research with them. And now I'm going back on Saturday. So I'm also looking forward to that.
Oh, going back to
Colombia. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've been there. You've been for a while, but just happened to be in Germany at the Okay.
Correct.
Wonderful. Great. Well, how has the time been, traveling abroad, having this opportunity to, study with be around other philosophers of science? And what's it like in Hanover? I've heard folks have come from there. I've seen scholars, working there. What's that like?
It's really nice, actually. They have, I think, a very, very interesting center going on. They have, it's particularly interesting for me, they have a program which they call like a Graduerte Kolleg or something like that. Sorry, my German pronunciation sucks. But they have this a group of PhD students and postdocs and other scholars working on science and values, projects on science and values, together with the University of Bielefeld. And so someone like Martin Carrier is also involved in this particular program. And so they've been, I think, very successful at attracting very smart students working on issues of science and values and, socially engaged philosophy of science for the past 10 years or so. And the program continues to be growing, and like they're getting more and more grants, and I think it's a very fruitful environment to be.
Fantastic. So, is this the Institute for Philosophy at Hanover?
Yeah, so they have the Institute for Philosophy, and then within the institute they have these Graduertenkolleg, and they also have a master's in philosophy of science, which is actually English is the main language, so that has attracted, I think, also a lot of students. So there are different things going on within the Institute of Philosophy.
Great. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear. I'm excited to hear more about the specifics of the projects you've been working on. But before we get into that, why don't we take a step back and get to know you as an individual and a little bit about your story of how you got into philosophy of science. So, tell us, Manuela, where did you grow up?
Okay, so I'm originally from Colombia, and I actually live in Colombia. So I went back some years ago, and I grew up in Bogotá. So that's the capital city. I was born in Bogotá, and I lived there my whole life growing up. So I'm sort of a city girl in these like very chaotic, big Latin American cities. So I'm used to that, let's say. I have sort of a big family. My parents got divorced when I was around 8 years old, and then I got, many siblings. I always say that I have all types of siblings, because I have a brother, sister, half sister, step brother, and step sister. all types of siblings, and
big blended family. Yeah. No, I can relate. Similar situation. It's always fun explaining that to people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so my mom, is a doctor. She's now retired. She's a pediatrician. And, it was kind of funny. My, family dinners growing up were always very oriented towards discussing medicine stuff.
Really?
It was kind of weird. My friends in high school used to make fun of me because of this. They would come, and then the dinners would be very awkward because we would have all these conversations about, I don't know.
Wow.
Treatments and diseases, and it was kind of strange, I guess.
I'm just curious. So was she? What kind of doctor was she? What did she do?
Pediatrician. So she was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Was
but
she?
Her husband, so my stepdad, he's also a doctor. He's a gastroenterologist.
Okay.
So yes, it was kind of
lots of just from everything.
That's the main thing, I guess. Mm-hmm.
2 specialties, and they brought it home from work, which is my experience. I don't know. I've had experiences where. We know for academics, we like to bring our work home sometimes and talk about things, sometimes we leave it away. But I've had experience with your physicians they're very interested in the work, or they don't talk about it at all. And they're just, you wouldn't even know if they're a physician. They're out of work clothes, or just this person at a barbecue on a Sunday, just hello, it's you just wouldn't even know. And so it's interesting to hear of the talk of bringing it and discussing. I
think especially, so I'm the oldest, but especially my brother and I would say we were always very curious about stuff. And then I guess this was the kind of stuff that they could actually, give us a lot of details about, get deep into it. So that was the thing.
So right away exposed to these kinds of bigger questions, probably difficult questions related to medicine. What about yourself? What were you personally interested in? What did you find yourself up to growing up?
Yeah, so I would say a broad range of interests. I finishing up high school, I really liked a lot of stuff. So I was really interested in math. Actually, almost went into math. Was really interested in also in literature and language related things. I was also interested in science, in chemistry. I was interested a lot. I really liked like a lot of subjects when I was in high school. I was really interested in a lot of things growing up. And then when I had to decide, so in Colombia it's kind of different from the US because we don't have like this like first year studies that you normally get in the US. And we actually do
general studies or something.
Yeah, and we actually don't have majors like the same way you have in the US. We just study like a particular subject. So you have to decide right away. You don't even declare a major. You just get into college with a particular subject in mind. So you have to apply to go into math or philosophy or whatever. And so you really have to. And then of course you can change career like paths if you need to. But you really have to think about what you want to do and what you like before choosing where to start. And this is of course very, very difficult for a 17 or 16-year-old.
Yeah. I suppose I mean, I guess I could understand like what is it? It's just like hyper or just a value in disciplinary in being being strong in one particular discipline, I guess. Like, I mean, I know this is like the French system and other systems as well that, that have require that like immediate distinction or decision in one particular subject. But, I mean, I'm sure there's like some educational literature on it. Like,
you know what I think? I think it's because it used to be the case in Colombia that we didn't have like professionalization degrees. So you ended up your like profession. I mean, like masters and PhDs are actually very, very recent in Colombia.
Okay.
Maybe 15 years or some 20, like the oldest I know. And so it used to be the case that you actually you went straight ahead to study whatever you wanted to do. So we actually have so law is not like a graduate curriculum. It's an undergraduate curriculum, same as medicine. So you start with medicine, you start with law, you start with engineering, you start with whatever you want to do, because it was during your undergrad that you're actually preparing for that. And when you're finished, you were done. And if you wanted to do something else, it used to be the case that you had to go abroad because we didn't have any PhD programs or master's programs.
Wow. So what was so I see here you did go into Universidad Nacional de Colombia. Is that one of the major universities in Colombia? The Universidad
Nacional is the largest public university in the country, and it's actually the largest university.
Wow.
So it's like the biggest university we have, and
I see 50,000 enrolled. Just it has also a very good reputation. It has the reputation that it is very difficult to get in because they do like their own exam to get in, and of course this is a publicly funded university, so it is very cheap, and for people who are actually not well off, it is practically free to go there. So it's very, very, very competitive to get in. 10% acceptance rate too. I mean, that's, or I've seen even as low as 5%. Wow. Okay. Anyway, it's a really good school. Yeah. Great. So one of the probably strongest public universities, maybe in, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the, I mean, of course they're bigger and I would say academically better public universities in the region. So there's the UNAM in Mexico, right? The Universidad Autónoma de Mexico, which is like, I think, known precisely, it has like this reputation of being one of the best of the region. The Universidad de Buenos Aires is another one. So there are I think, other universities in the region. But in Colombia, it is definitely
the best,
largest and the best public university that we have.
Okay. So, I mean, I know this will be sort of getting ahead but I know what I'm curious is, you've had experience, I can see, for going forward, of having worked and studied in other universities in the United States, and obviously now in Europe. So what is it like? How did your time compare with this particular university? Like, what was that like for you? I know at the time it's kind of this sort of like, historical, you don't really have anything to compare it to, but what was it like, I suppose, basically?
No, I really wanted to study in this university.
Okay.
So I went to a private Catholic school, the Marymount School in Bogotá, growing up, and it was an only girls school too. I was ready to get that fast.
Yeah.
And really, I was looking forward to, studying this big public university and, get rid of the religious upbringing and, experience the world and this kind of thing and be free.
Very excited. Very excited.
I was really looking forward to it. And it was a little bit of that, for sure. It was a strong contrast to my high school, for sure. And then also philosophy was, of course, philosophy is a male-dominated discipline, but it was particularly male-dominated when I the program in this national university. There was most of my classmates were men, and all of the professors, all the faculty in the philosophy department were men.
Wow.
They only hired a woman my last year there. And so it was really, really male, which at first was awesome to me because I was
you've been in a women's
feminine, female dominated, but it was feminine and this gender laden way context, and so I was eager to change that and to experience something else. So at the beginning, this what seemed like a very rational and abstract and competitive environment was
the traditional masculine philosophy or
exactly.
whatever. Which is I think you might be one of the, well, I don't want to say one of the only, but that's a unique experience to have, to then not especially almost be, well, I guess depending on how competitive and but just, going into that environment and seeing it as at least initially being, oh, wow, this is, just so new. And I've been craving something, just something different, I suppose. Before now we might look at this and say oh, I don't know, this is, I don't know if this is the best kind of, representation or
exactly.
just this isn't the best mix for knowledge.
It actually changed a lot while I was there because so initially I felt great. And as I was saying, it was really, really, I was really a minority. We had so I remember I started with a group of, I think it was 24 students in philosophy. Mm-hmm. And then only 4 of us were women. And then, but at the end of the first year, I was the only one left. The other 3 women left. So left the program. So I ended up being the only woman in my semester. That's it. And so but as I was saying, in the beginning, this was it looked pretty good to me. And then
sure.
I started seeing small things that were awkward because of this, right? So it's also a very competitive since I was little, and I started going to the philosophy seminars, and then at the beginning I was super shy. It was really difficult for me to start talking during the seminars, and in these more academic discussions, I guess. To start doing that was a challenge. But then when I started doing that, sometimes I got strange, weird comments from people saying, oh, but, don't get mad about this or whatever. And I was I'm not mad. I thought I was doing exactly the same thing as my.
This is what other people do. Yeah. Why mad? What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
We're supposed to disagree. What are you talking about? Yeah.
So I got sometimes strange like comments or perceptions of the things that I did.
I see where you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. So little by little, I started to notice that this was something that was not ideal.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm glad to hear I'm glad to hear there's a bit of a shakeup, or at least some, movement toward that. I think that's generally been the trend, but I mean, it still is what it is.
Yeah. Well, so much that actually at the end, I really wanted to do some feminist philosophy, which of course at my university was impossible because there wasn't anyone working on feminist philosophy. And
right.
so I took some classes in gender studies, I think, but I didn't like them. And I then read, this was very, very important for me. I took a history of science class. And I read there Evelyn Fox Keller and Sandra Harding's work. And that's where I got super interested in that. That was eye-opening kind of moment for me to see that there was some philosophical arguments as I knew them from my philosophy courses that could have this gender angle, and I really like that.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned you had varied interests. How did you end up settling on, how did you come to find, how did you come to find philosophy to begin with in Colombia? Was it,
Yeah, this is a funny story. So we used to have philosophy classes in high school. It was mandatory. This is no longer the case, but it was mandatory. So
that's pretty unique. Yeah.
Yeah. It was part of the guidelines of the Ministry of Education that you had to have in 10th and 11th grade, we had philosophy classes at school. And so my philosophy teacher at the time, he came in when I was finishing up, in 11th grade, I think. So 11th grade is our last year in high school. And so we were all deciding what to study, which picking universities and this kind of stuff. And then he told me one day, I liked philosophy, but I was not particularly interested in philosophy, or that I hadn't made up my mind. Let's say.
Sure.
And so he pulled me aside and said, "You should study philosophy."
Wow. Okay. Some encouraging belief right away. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like, "You're very good at it. You like the math, which is gonna, give you the logic principles that you need to have philosophical discussions, and you like also having arguments, and we like all this language related stuff, and so this is going to be perfect for you." It's just and then at that point, I think so this is just a parenthesis, just to say that how important mentors have been for me in my career, and I think are in general for anyone in doing philosophy or academic stuff, but in particular for women in philosophy. Someone told me that I was particularly good at this, and that I really should consider studying philosophy
that's great.
So important for me at that point. And so at that point, I started considering studying philosophy, and I looked into it, and I actually enrolled in philosophy, thinking, I'm gonna give it a chance, let's do and see how it goes, and then maybe I'll change if I don't like it. But I had a very open-minded approach to it.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, wonderful. So you had your experience being a wonderful mentorship, which is really great. I would totally agree with that sentiment about that. I think we might not necessarily discount, but we can't put enough emphasis on supportive people who are leading us to. I think a lot of us, especially in philosophy of science, I mean, there's something we might find it on our own, but usually sometimes it comes in in the relevance of a really good teacher or professor in high school or college that has just introduced us or just, shown a little bit of encouragement to say that, hey, this is something like we could do or that we would be interested in. So, So, okay. So then, so doing philosophy, is this something that you saw studying? Yes. But like doing professionally, is this something that, you felt like this is, or was there, I know you were come from a family of physicians. Was this also, was sometimes if you either become a doctor or you go the opposite route?
So that was the last thing that I wanted to do.
Last thing you wanted to do. You see that? You're like, no way do I want to do that.
Yeah, I had many interests, but I had like, the one thing that I had clear in my mind is that I didn't want to do this.
Fair enough.
So, so then, when I started in philosophy, we had like this very analytic program, I think, in the Universidad Nacional, and so we had to take four logic courses, which is like a lot.
Oh wow, that's like a logic major.
And then because I had all these like I had this strong interest in math that clicked with me like from the beginning. I loved the logic classes starting up. That was the thing that I really, really liked. And so I did my 4 courses, and then we can do, you don't call them TAs, right? When they're undergrads, but what do you call them in the US?
Same thing. I think you might designate as you might qualify them as an undergraduate TA or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that for the rest of my time there, actually. Yeah. As a TA for logic courses.
Well, great. So then, so I noticed, so in terms of considering professional, going into professional track, right. Looking into a program not far away from a program I haven't visited, but I've spoken to other folks who've been there, and some great things. The University of Notre Dame, their history and philosophy of science. So, what motivated you to go to this program in particular? I know you mentioned having taken a history of science course, because doing philosophy of science, as we know, we could do it in a traditional philosophy program potentially, but there are these centers and hybrid programs that bring together both historians and philosophers, and sometimes folks who do a little bit of both, integrated HBS people, we might call them. But what was it about this program that was exciting to you?
So finishing up.
Undergrad,
I became really interested in this feminist stuff, and then I really liked my philosophy of science courses as an undergrad. That was something that I really enjoyed, and so so I was thinking about doing philosophy of science, so maybe to clarify your previous question, I had settled on an academic career, I think, way back. I really had in my mind that I wanted to be an academic since I was...
You did? Okay.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I was... what do you call this? A bookworm? Do you say that in English?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I don't know if you would say that. I read a lot of books growing up. I was a bookworm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Because in Spanish, the expression is a library mouse.
A library mouse. Oh, that's so much better. That's so much better. That has, to me, that has such a positive connotation. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but bookworms can sometimes be, I don't know. Yeah, it's just depending on the context. But a library mouse is, I'm going to say that's wonderful. But,
so I was definitely a library mouse growing up.
Okay, perfect.
Still is, my favorite place is the library. Take me to a library.
Yep. Feels so.
I was really academically oriented since I was really, really small, and so I really thought that was the thing that I was going to enjoy the most. And I did work for a little bit. So I went. I taught philosophy in high school for a couple of years after I graduated in philosophy before applying to grad school. And so I decided I was going to give it a try and teach a little philosophy and see how that went. But it was very clear, like my first year doing that. I mean, I enjoyed it because I enjoyed teaching. But my first year doing that, it was very clear to me that I was in the wrong side of the classroom. It's like, I really want to be,
Well, Wait, so I'm sorry. So where were you teaching? I'm sorry.
At a high school.
Okay. Sorry.
So I decided to
So trying to
work.
Yeah, sure. Went into secondary education for a bit. Of course, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is a possibility for us in Colombia. Since I was telling you like this, we had these mandatory philosophy courses, and also because you don't really need like a particular license or pedagogical degree or something, or education degree to teach. So especially if it's in private school. So I did that. I became a philosophy teacher at a high school for a couple of years.
Okay. And so that's I guess this is interesting. So I mean, I understand it wasn't for you, but I mean, what is, so for some folks it might be, or like, they might have that experience where, they finish and there's some really, I don't know, just like, so what did you find? Like, you were obviously, went on to further study, but what was the experience like?
I really like it. I enjoy it because I enjoy teaching. I still do. So I really like teaching, and these students were super smart, and it was a really like wealthy private school in Bogotá. So the students were very well prepared. They had like a privileged education, and so yes, I could do fun stuff with them, and I it was cool. I liked it. I just felt like I wasn't done learning, so I really wanted to.
Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. It can be stimulating, but then there's like want to keep learning. You want to keep being challenged for your own, for your own growth. Like, and in a growth that's not, I feel like teaching is somewhere where you definitely can continue to learn how to best communicate and how to best, nurture others' ideas or like the way in which they can grow. But I feel like there's something where you have to keep learning yourself, or like a lot of people have that itch. And so
And since I really, really liked learning, this was something
makes sense. Yeah.
That I was like, no, I have to apply twice. And actually, I was thinking about coming to Europe. I always thought that I was going to come to Europe and study here. I even did a semester abroad when I was an undergrad here in Hanover, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because I really to, learn my German and be prepared to start grad school and everything.
So in planning for grad school, so you had the academic like sort of track set up. What was it about? I mean, what was it about Europe in doing philosophy that attracted you perhaps above and beyond other programs, or just maybe in general? Like what? No,
I just, I had this
idea.
Vision. But I wanted to, study in Europe and be an academic and, like very naively.
Gotcha. A little bit of like the life, like the picture of it.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
When it was really the time to apply to grad school, I started, finding out how this worked. Right. And then I realized that, the U.S. had these fully funded programs that looked very well.
Right? Yeah.
Very nice to me.
Get paid to learn.
So I started looking at programs. So you asked me why Notre Dame. So I started looking at programs where I could work with a feminist philosopher.
Yeah.
Doing some sort of like philosophy of science or within a philosophy of science program or in a philosophy department that has some sort of philosophy of science group or something like that. And so I looked at not so many, I'm going to say like 5 or 6 places. This was so naive. Like this was ages ago and I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I emailed everybody. So I emailed Sandra Harding and Helen Longino and Elizabeth.
Oh, wow. Wow. Just like getting into you're like the top 10 feminist philosophers of science.
And then
why not?
And I emailed and Nancy Tuana was another one. And Janet Kurani, who ended up being my dissertation director.
Wonderful.
And so Janet, I mean, most of them replied to me and were very nice and everything. But then I applied to all these universities and I got in Notre Dame. So that's why I went there.
Great. So,
and it was, I mean, I cannot believe I got in. This is so absurd to me. Now that I know how the system works, and
right, it's a very good. Right, no, Notre Dame is a very good program, very competitive. But I mean, your background seems to warrant like very strong considerations, and very happy to hear. So,
yeah, it's crazy. I'm so glad, because otherwise, I mean, everything could have gone wrong.
It could have been, I mean, a lot of it is just kind of, some of it, a lot of it is luck in terms of like
exactly.
where we end up, or who knows if you would have gotten into other place, how the trajectory would have turned out. But so tell us a little bit about the program there and what in your experience there. So
right. So this is an HPS program, as you were saying, which is something that I really liked, because I had like very interdisciplinary concerns, and so I think I was a very good fit for the program, and there was a really, I mean, for me, the program was something really amazing. Like I felt so happy to have the opportunity to go there and like study with all these philosophers and historians, and learning all this. Like I really enjoyed that. It was like a dream come true for me. It was really, really exciting at the beginning to be there. And then this is like, I'm just gonna say amazing things about the HPS program, but then this has to be, balanced with living in South Bend, Indiana, which is the dark side.
Okay, qualify. Well, I think full transparency will provide greater credibility to this. Yeah, right. So
so
coming from a big city like Bogotá.
In contrast, that was really, really tough. To live in South Bend, and these very horrible winters, and personally I had a very hard time adapting
sure back to a Catholic university as well. You're like, oh no, like what did I get? I'm back in high school now. Great. Like
full circle. Yes. I felt a little bit like that too. Very conservative environment in general, and and then I was doing feminist philosophy, right? So there was tension there, like between those. Yeah.
Well, they say sometimes work can be. It's like you can be motivated by the contrast with what you're at, kind of like with I don't know. I'm not necessarily like that should be conducive or encouraged to exist, but anyway, I could. So basically, it sounds like it was obviously like some great professors and things like that, but it could be I mean, graduate school, I think in general, you're literally leaving. You might be leaving home. You might be leaving, what you're familiar with. You might be leaving your support system, especially if you had supportive professors or in undergrad or even like a good work environment, and you're going somewhere completely new with a completely new set of people. Even if they've been, desired of you to come and want you to come, it's like, you just got to acclimate to new environments, new setting. And especially with something like South Bend, Indiana. I mean, there's not, I mean, some of the best programs are in some of like the most, I don't know, remote places, it seems like, but just what it is.
It's what it is. It's tough. It was tough for me. It was also tough for me because I was also in a long distance relationship, and that was also very tough.
Oh geez, back in Colombia, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would say that like personally, like academically, it was really nice and fruitful for me, and I really enjoyed the academic environment and the people who were there. And I had a blast. But personally, it was tough.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. I think a lot of folks can feel, again, it's like there's this contrast too, because you're like, well, I should be feeling this way. I should be feeling support, whatever. But just honestly, it can be, Yeah, and I'm not going to say that's the experience for everyone. Some people's experience is a dream, and they, kind of long to be back in graduate school. Sometimes, what I've heard, once they get the tenure job, they're like, "You don't know how good you had it. Stay." like all these. But but at the same time, it's like, yeah, everyone has different experiences. I think we should be open about talking about the challenge, the real personal challenges of uprooting, just, other personal, life is still happening as much as we're excited about being in libraries and being in, going to conferences and, it's like life, you're still dealing with things. So I think that's really good.
But having said that, I think also like the professors, like the faculty in the HPS program at Notre Dame were so supportive. I mean, they were like, I have no words to thank them, like Janet, Don Howard, Jay Malone. So the History of Science Society actually moved to Notre Dame while I was there. And this was back in the day where they did everything together with the PSA as well. And so I became an assistant for them. And he was amazing, like how supportive he was with, my studies. And he was, the folks there were really, really nice.
Okay. Well, why don't you take the time, tell us a little bit about how your project, your dissertation project, how this came to be, the story of like how you came to bring about kind of your first main works. So.
Okay. So I did my dissertation on agnotology. So the study of ignorance and the challenges, of agnotology, or that agnotology brought, I guess, to philosophy of science. And so this was a time where Proctor and Schevinger's agnotology volume came out, and also Oreskes and Conway's Merchants of Doubt came out. And so there was like this interest in, doubt mongering and the manufacture of doubt and this type of thing, and I was really interested in that kind of like the epistemological questions that were that emerged from that framework, and how do we think about ignorance in a scientific context, and especially the type of ignorance that is like macro ignorance. So it's nothing that it's not like related to doing something wrong in the research process, but like, someone is like manipulating the research in a broader scale so that it produces the science that is favorable to them, like the tobacco companies did, or this kind of stuff. And then, of course, climate science was also like a big example of this. And then, I also work a little bit on pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceutical research, because pharmaceutical companies became like the best example, I guess, the paradigmatic example of how you actually manipulate or shape research in certain ways to obtain favorable outcomes and things like that, and how that is related to like ignorance in the broader public and within like policymakers circles and things like that. So that was like the topic of my dissertation, but I think that very quickly led to what became like the big topic for my research, which is like the commercialization of science, and how having these really big private companies investing and developing scientific research is affecting the way we know the things we get to know, how we know them, who is interested in that knowledge, and this kind of stuff.
So by the commercialization of science, so what can you give us some examples of what you're referring to?
Yeah, so this some big change, like a transition that's been happening since the end of the Cold War. More and more scientific research is being conducted in private settings. So private research centers and think tanks, contract research organizations, this type of venues, and funded by private companies. And so much that today, the majority of scientific research done worldwide is privately funded and performed. And so this is the way, and then you have, of course, also publicly funded research, and universities have been historically like bastions of publicly funded research, but this has also started to change in the 80s with legislation such as the Bayh-Dole Act, where researchers in public universities were encouraged to take tax money, so publicly funded grants, and they are able to privatize and commercialize the results of that research, even when it is publicly funded. And so there's a lot of interesting and sort of new connections between university researchers and private industry that is going on right now. And it's more and more encouraged by university administrators because, of course, it brings a lot of money to universities. And so I think this is what I've been working on. I think this has affected the ways we pursue research. So certainly the questions that are being researched, what graduate students work on, but also it affects the whole research process. So it has changed the way we publish. For example, so pharmaceutical companies, this really great research by Sergio Sismondo, sociologist of science, who has done all this research on publication planning firms. So nowadays, pharmaceutical companies can actually hire a publication planning firm to write up their articles and, put them through the publication process, and then just pay someone to, sign it as an author and things like this. And so it has in many ways corrupted the research process. And so this is fascinating to me also because I think we don't pay enough attention to this. So this is the way it works today. So we have like this very ideal view of science and what the scientific process is.
Right.
But I think more and more this has become like the common practice. And of course it has all these epistemic but also ethical implications that I think as a philosopher of science are very interesting.
Yeah, so you mentioned the title of your dissertation, Agnotology's Challenge to Philosophy of Science. So what is the main challenge here for philosophers of science? Because in searching, I must have heard of the term agnotology before, but it's been a while. And I've noticed that, right, you mentioned something like Oresky's work and Proctor. Mm-hmm. So it seems like this, at least, I mean, I'm ignorant to this particular, the work in this particular subject, but is this something that generally has been the interest of historians or epistemologists? And is there a difference in terms of just like, because they're interested in more of like a cultural ignorance? So there's like more of the basically it's like from the methodology that has been just if tradition has been more of historical, and now, you're kind of bringing it into the fore of more philosophy of science focused. Like, I guess, I'm interested in, what is the challenge and I guess it's
many questions there. So I think there's been like an interest in ignorance, studies of ignorance, I would say more generally in the past, like 20 years maybe, or mm-hmm. So agnotology is one of these like lines of research that is, I think it was definitely more situated in the history of science, and it was really, so Robert Proctor was a historian of science, was really the one who was like moving this along. But then you also have the epistemologies of ignorance, which are like more philosophically oriented by the works of Charles Mills and Nancy Tuana, for instance. They're also doing, I would say, studies on ignorance from a philosophical perspective. And then you also have like sort of science studies. So you also have like ignorance studies from a more like sociological point of view, and how they, so they are describing like in a very like descriptive, not prescriptive way, like what these allegedly constructions of ignorance are, and so yeah, it's but I think they're all like kind of they have like interest in common. They just have like a different normative setting, I think, to study ignorance. So I think so. One of the challenges that I wanted to highlight in my dissertation was exactly this. Like that I think there's a question. I don't know if it's maybe it's a demarcation question, but there's a normative question when talking about ignorance in science that we have to address, and it's because we have to decide where to draw the line between what is like acceptable construction of knowledge and what should be considered unacceptable because it actually leads to ignorance in this corrupted or manipulative sense.
Right.
And that's very difficult to do, of course, because so part of the reason why it has been so successful and was so successful for instance, the tobacco companies was precisely because it looked like, tradition, like well produced scientific research. So they were following all the rules, doing research, like funding all these really great projects in the most top-ranked universities with very well-known scientists, and everything was working very well. So what's the problem, right? Like,
sure.
Why is this not like knowledge production? Where is the problem? And so there's like maybe it's like a demarcation question that I was interested in.
Wonderful. It sounds like a fascinating issue and a fascinating question. And then one, surprisingly, like just the very basic facts that you're presenting, that's just, it makes you really think about, the impacts or what kinds of, how does this play into like this, as you mentioned, agnotology. So that's wonderful. How was the project received?
What do you mean?
Oh, I mean, like, I don't know. So I guess what I mean is, in terms of, putting it out there, either it could be from your readers, or could be from other people that you've gone on to publish, like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun. It's really like, I don't know if surprising is a word, but it's really controversial. So people always have reactions to this, and so I always have a really engaged public every time I present at a conference or something, because people have strong reactions to what I was saying. But I like this actually, but it was actually, so when I was working more on agnotology, like after like when I was finishing up and a little bit after my PhD. Mm-hmm. I think like my papers were actually well received. So I had a good experience publishing my first papers, which I'm really thankful for, because it was, like it's so hard when you start getting these. So thankfully it wasn't like that at the beginning for me. It was not easy, of course, but like it was a smooth process I was also able to publish in like interdisciplinary journals, which was really nice to me. So some of my papers on agnotology are on STS journals.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I always wonder. Well, it's always a question of like, you have an idea, and especially when it cuts across different methods or different somewhat related disciplines. How how best to then package it to then include it, and whether you should include it in something like, STS. But it seems like, in this particular issue, it seems like getting both, historians or STS plus philosophy of science, it seems like a good thing to do. Just having this other, whereas maybe they would not necessarily go. Especially things like values in science. I know values in science crosses over. You mentioned this. We'll probably get to it in a minute here, but that that field, those conferences, they cross over quite a bit. It's not just philosophers; it's STS people. It's it's people who've approached from a variety of things, and so choosing how to publish, how to disseminate the work is another decision. I think maybe we don't necessarily talk about as much in terms of, we just think of come up with really good ideas and get them out there, but how to get them out there, where do you want them represented is another decision. And it's not always necessarily just for professional positions, but also the knowledge, how do you want your ideas to best be interacted with? So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So tell us about, working on agnotology, completing the dissertation at Notre Dame. So what came next? How did you, continue the quest for a professional academic career, that was set prior? I mean, is this something, it seems like, I see your CV here. It looks like, kind of a straight shot through, but, before ending up, in your current position, you had it sounds like, some postdoc experience. So why don't you tell us about that?
So when I finished up at Notre Dame, I got this postdoc in Helsinki, in Finland. Yeah. So they have this Center for the Philosophy of the Social Sciences.
Yeah.
Helsinki, which was so the director of the center was at the time Uskalimäki, who's a very well-known philosopher of economics. And they had, they have a very interesting group working on philosophy of economics, but also philosophy of the social sciences more broadly conceived. And then, so the connection with my work was because one of the agnotological cases that I actually studied in my dissertation was the financial crisis of 2008. And I was economics was actually one of the sciences that I was looking into when I was thinking about the production of doubt and ignorance in the public eye, let's say. So at Notre Dame also had as a professor Phil Mirowski, who's also a very well-known philosopher and historian of economics. You know how it is when you're finishing up. I don't know what your experience is on this, but when you're finishing up, you just send a million CVs to all the positions that you think you can end up in, and
right.
I mean, this one sounded like a very nice new challenge for me, it was something that I hadn't done before. I mean, I had done a little bit because, Phil was on my committee and I had, taken courses with him on the history of economics. And so I started to become really interested in that. And also because of the commercialization, my interest on the commercialization of science was tied to the history of, neoliberalism and the, a broader, social economic organization of science and how that works. And so his work is also tied to these topics. And so I became more and more interested in that. And then, so it was I guess a nice connection to go to Helsinki and start working with this group. You also have very good feminist philosophers of science working there. So Kristina Rowling was there at the time, and Inkeri Koskinen was there at the time. And so, it was a good fit, I guess, for me. I I really, so we were talking about how some people who want to go back to grad school. I definitely want to go back to my postdoc.
I interviewed, it was a Caterina Marchioni. I'm not sure if
Caterina.
Yeah. So I'll share that interview with you.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was a long time. I have to revisit that, but that was probably, it was pre-pandemic, so I wasn't sure, but I remember she just shared this, about the center, and then I looked it up, and there's like just deep with philosophers of science, and everyone's there and having a good time. I'm like, wow, this place looks great. Like, this is like a lot of fun,
it was really good at the time I came. It was really, really. There was also people working on Samuel Regula, who works on social epistemology, but doing like computer simulations, which is also something I'm interested in. And so, so there was like these, like intersection of different things that I am interested in. So it was really cool.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so great time in postdoc. However, so there were some interesting experiences with looking like the opportunity to return to Colombia. Tell us. I mean, it's not often. I mean, this happens sometimes, but like, it's not super common to be able to return back to your sort of like where it all started, to find the department with which you might have even, or at least like a related department. So like, how did this come about to be able to return to Columbia and join the previously male dominated philosophy department, now a little bit less so. So what was this like?
So I was in Helsinki, and I'm really, thinking about what was next, I guess. I was on the job market, of course, doing interviews and all this stuff. And it was actually like a very personal decision. So I was with my partner in this long distance relationship. We had actually split for a little between these things, but we were working it out at the time, and then I was in the job market, and then I actually got a position in the US, like an offer.
Oh wow, nice!
And then, so that was like the moment where I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to the US, pursue the academic career in the US? Yeah. Or what am I going to do? And so it was, but this was a completely emotional decision. This was not rational at all. Like, I felt I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't come to the US and do it. I felt like I really wanted to go back to Colombia. Yeah, and of course. It was like the thing that was moving me at the time. I was like going back home and, like to my relationship, to my family, to my country, everything. And so I actually didn't have anything.
Fair enough.
I said no to the position, which was really hard. And then I started email everyone I knew, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then at one point, so the Universidad de los Andes, which is where I am right now, and the Universidad de los Andes is like the largest private university in the country.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Okay.
It's a very well-ranked university in terms of research in Latin America. And so out of nowhere, they opened this, like the first postdoc position ever in philosophy at this place.
Wonderful.
And so I was like, this is it. This is what I have to do. I have to apply to this and get it. And so I did like this super overachieving application and put everything in there. And I got it. And so I decided to go back, and I started as a postdoc, and then really, really fast, like 6 months after that, my position opened, and I got it.
Congratulations. Wow. No, it takes, that's phenomenal. Well, I'm really happy to hear it. So, okay. So then, you've had the experience as a student, but now you've been having this experience from, the US, learning the US, Helsinki. building your research program. So I appreciate it like a lot. Like I appreciate this. This has been more definitely much more like a personal focused, and historical thing, which I really like. But yeah, I want to give you an opportunity to share about your research. So like, what's going on now? So what has been the current focus now since the dissertation? And, it's been a while since that, but like, what's your research looking like now? Is there anything you'd like to share about kind of either recent or current or upcoming?
Sure. So I have a couple of projects right now that are, I think, super interesting. Before the pandemic, I started working on these applications to the DFG. So this is like the German research foundation. And so I applied for one grant with Thorsten Wilhold here in Hanover for a project on biasing mechanisms in science. So I think also we are both very interested in this so related to the values, to the science and values debate. And so what happens when we all acknowledge that values actually play a role in scientific research, and that this is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can also be a bad thing, right? So feminist philosophers were actually very smart at pointing this out, right? That when you have like sexist values, guiding the research, this can lead to like epistemically and ethically problematic consequences, right? But when you have the maybe better values or more appropriate values, maybe feminist values or democratic values, then you can get even epistemically better research and research results and scientific knowledge because of this. And so now the question is, once you accept and once we get rid of the value-free ideal, the question is, okay, how do we choose these values, right? Like, which are the correct values or the legitimate values, or however you want to put it.
How do we use the values? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how do we manage the values? Because maybe the values are fine, but maybe they're not fine always and everywhere. So philosophers of science in general, we tend not to be relativists, and so we don't want to say no, any value works or whatever.
Right.
We want to have like a normative stance to distinguish what is appropriate and what it's not, and especially because I think the feminist tradition here is really strong. So especially because the feminist philosophers of science are really committed to critiquing sexist values in research, right? They cannot say every value is okay because you've seen what sexist values do to research. So this sort of it's been called by Thorsten and Bennett Holman the new demarcation problem. How do we make this distinction? And so in making this distinction, I had this thought that we also talk about biases in science all the time, and in the science and values debate, there was a historical reason why we stopped talking about biases per se, and we started talking about values. But now, with this new demarcation question in mind, maybe we want to distinguish values that might contribute to the research in different ways and biases, or maybe you want to say that values sometimes are, contribute to knowledge, but sometimes bias the research. And so we got more interested in what are these biasing mechanisms, different biasing mechanisms in scientific research, and connected to this question of values. And so we're just starting. The idea of the project. So we got the funding. And then very nice. This summer we hired Jamie Shaw, who's a Canadian philosopher of science.
Oh, wonderful.
And he just, started here this summer. And Jamie has done really, really interesting work on peer review bias. And so I think he's going to be a great addition to the team. And so, yeah, we want to, map out these bias mechanisms in research, like the different ways we talk about biases in science, maybe different ways in which we identify something as a bias, and also to think about like some ways in which we can counteract maybe biases in research in different ways, depending on of the type of bias that we have.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this question of bias is really interesting. So what are could you give me some examples of just like some general bias and that you might be focused on in particular, that we might be worried about? And also, I'm curious about the question of like, is there like some sort of term for like an acceptable bias, and meaning like where it's like bias could be kind of a good thing, like
because we think that bias actually has like a pejorative connotation. So when
right
talking about bias, we're talking about something that is problematic
but not necessarily. So
I think this is what I was referring to when I said that historically there was a reason why we started talking about values and not biases, and it was in part because of the researching feminist philosophy of science. So you really wanted to stop.
Those kind of biases,
related to the value-free idea, right? So if you have values, they're biasing your research, and that's wrong. And so I think like the arguments against the value-free idea at the beginning had to do with, let's stop talking about biases and let's start just acknowledging that there are some roles that values can play in the research process without being biases, because biases has like this negative connotation that we want to avoid. So we just talk about values, which is more neutral in that sense, and not biases, I guess. But now, but then there's still bias. I mean, bias is a word that we use in science all the time, right? Like you have debiasing mechanisms in research and things like this. And so, we want to understand a little bit better how, like, are these different types of biases. So scientists talk about, debiasing tools in research, and really talking about very specific, many times statistical tools that they can use to avoid the presence of biases in their methodological decisions making. But we also have all these other like gender biases, right? Like all the social biases, racial biases, and stuff that also affect scientific research in different ways. But those are not the same than these statistical biases, right? Like it's something different from this. And we also talk about cognitive biases nowadays, right? So there's all this research in psychology about cognitive biases, and these ways in which we organize our thoughts because of the way the human brain has evolved. And how we make all these mistakes that it seems like inevitable and sometimes, right? Like, so we have these cognitive biases that, of course, scientists are human beings, so they also have these cognitive biases and so on. This, I don't know if these examples clarify.
Very cool. No, there's so many. There's been a lot of work, I imagine, for excavating and exploring these things and then continuing to explore. Wonderful. Well, no, this sounds really great. So I'm looking forward to seeing, this.
I should say, I know we're running long, but I should say one thing about my other project, which is
yes, please. Before we get to the last question, please. I don't want to cut you off. So So
I have this other project with Anna Lochner in the University of Wuppertal, also here in Germany, and this is a project. It's actually originally her idea, but we're working on a project on epistemic intimidation. So we are interested. She has done a lot of research on climate science, and she has explaining different papers how these constant attack and intimidation of climate scientists has like a different epistemic consequences, right? Like how it hinders research in different ways, and it contributes to a climate where scientists don't want to do their work or don't want to, explain to the public what they're doing and things like this. And climate science, I think, has been a very special case in which this happens. How, like the attacks on climate skeptics have attacked science in so many different ways that it has really impacted the discipline. And so we really want to conceptualize this, how this intimidation of scientists as knowers affects the knowledge that they produce in different ways. And so this is a longer project. We want to write a manuscript on this. So this is the other big thing that I'm
Wonderful. So it sounds like some excellent projects to look forward to. I'm really happy. I'm really happy to hear. And what I'm also happy to hear is like a consistent collaboration across, with folks, So it's like while you're in Colombia and you're focusing on your work. And I feel bad we didn't really get to talk so much about, maybe the specifics about, what it's like. I mean, is there something in, sometimes it can be, there's two different situations. Either you're growing a field of philosophy of science at your university, or sometimes you're, kind of like your network is elsewhere, and you remain like sort of socially engaged from afar. Is this at the, University of Los Andes? Is this something where you did mention you brought in values in science, Canadian philosopher? That's great. Is this something where trying to grow the philosophy of science kind of program there, or I know that can be challenging, so I'm curious what that's like locally.
Yes, it's challenging. So it's hard also to maintain your network, your international networks going while you're abroad, because it's right. It's time consuming, but also it's expensive, and especially because of currency differences, it's very challenging for, I would say, researchers working in the global south or in smaller economies, I guess, to be able to spend the money on this, and you need it in order to do all the networking and be there for the research. So that has been a challenge, but it's also part of what I study. So I've done some work on, North-South relations and how this affects the scientific knowledge produced. And so what we normally do, many scientists and academics working in places like Latin America do, is foster these international collaborations and the collaborative projects funded by agencies in Europe and the United States. So you look for funding all the time because we don't get the funding. We actually, the Colombian government invests so little money on research that it's really difficult.
I wish there were I just was curious. Yeah. Maybe also if is there on the horizon any works toward developing regional conferences or trying to pull SPSP or something into Latin American territory? I just feel like it's either just US, Australia, and Europe, and it's nothing else. It's come on, let's go somewhere else.
I just recently became a member of the board of SPSP.
Oh,
so because of this, because they wanted to include
perfect. Yes,
I was not European or North American, and so I guess this is my job now.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great.
I have to make this happen, and also we have wonderful networks in Latin America. I mean, you have a network of people working on philosophy of science. We have a group at Los Andes and other universities in Colombia working on, it's a little broader, so logic, epistemology, and philosophy of science, but we organize conferences every 2 years or so. And I think it's really, it was a really good venue, before the pandemic. We're just trying to, catch up on that. And so there are networks, there are things happening. There's this SOCITE, so the sort of like the forest, like the STS society in Latin America, which is
cool.
really, really nice. And, like there's a big network that I think probably more than philosophy of science, I think the social studies of science are a really booming field in Latin America. This is something that it's growing, and there's a lot of people interested in STS topics, and it's relevant for the region. So so this definitely exists. But then, you also have like the north-south connection that you want to encourage, right? So
yeah, I would just love to see a little bit more. And I think coming in as a someone who wasn't familiar with philosophy of science for a while, like I'm realizing now I just sort of accepted the traditional relations and the traditional sort of how things work, and it's like I never really questioned what now I'm starting to realize like just how at the time fixed that sometimes that's just the way it is, like institutional constraints, regional constraints are just you go where there are people. So but it's like there are other people that are doing this work in Latin America.
There's definitely I want to say there's definitely ways to do it. Just got another interesting thing. We just got an NIH grant at my university to develop a program in bioethics and research ethics.
Oh, wonderful!
And so there are opportunities even for academics working in Latin America, for instance, to get funding from the NIH, for instance. So there are opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I'm not denying that at all. I'm speaking more to like the. I'm sure that's going on, and I'm sure there's like lots of there's funding and there's things like that. I just mean like just maybe I'm speaking more to like workshops and conferences and things like that. They just don't seem to be as pulling and equally distributed. I would say that's all I'm referring to.
I agree. I totally agree.
And so I feel like so I think we could do a better job of. So I'm really happy to see you on the board of the SPSP board or getting, something going on. All right. I do have to run really pretty quickly here. So let me finish with this last question here of what do you take to be the greatest challenge facing philosophy of science today?
Yeah, so actually, I think I've been thinking about this question, and I think my answer is going to be related to what we're talking about, because there are many challenges, and of course, I know people have probably, talked with you about, like how to engage with the scientists, how to engage with the broader public, how to help communicate science in an appropriate way, how to, which would be very important for me, how to counter misinformation and, alternative facts and all this narrative today. And this doubt mongering, etc. So that would be very important for me as a philosopher of science. But I feel like obliged to say something about diversity issues in the discipline. So I think philosophy, and don't take me wrong, because I think philosophy of science is one of the best subfields within philosophy regarding diversity issues. And as I've been, going through the discipline in the years, I think it's becoming more and more diverse. But I must say, like this, the type of challenges that we were talking about are still a main thing. So we do not think about, organizing conferences or going to workshops or, inviting scholars or, having PhD students. We don't think about these things like explicitly as opportunities to be more inclusive. Or maybe some people do, of course, but, in general, I think this is a place where the discipline, I think, could do better. Being more inclusive and being more inclusive in a specific sense, because of course you have a very diverse pool of scholars working in the US already, right? So you have a lot of people who are very diverse in the US only. We're in this global academy, let's say, and I think especially the issues that are becoming more and more important in philosophy of science today. So the philosophy of science in practice, the socially engaged philosophy of science. So these kind of topics, I think, really need also to take into account, like scholars working in the global south.
Wonderful. Well, I know there's a rebranded diversity and inclusion group. It's at the PSA. I'm not sure if you saw that, but I think I don't know. Yeah.
I voted for that.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. And I think that's a really good step forward, but you're right. I think I would love to see, I'm sure that now, if I'm, I'm in Pittsburgh actually now, so I'll go to the meeting or go, sort of be included in that.
There, so
wonderful. I'll definitely say hello. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll say, hey, we'll connect. I just I would love to see, it would be great to hear from voices like yours, proposals for how to include that. Cause I think I think folks sometimes get so bogged down or not bogged down. I want to say they come well intended with their perception of what it means to work on issues with diversity. And I think some just are, they come with their own issues, or they're I don't know. I just think we need more, of course. And so we need we need these other perspectives, and we need a more broadened, grounding in terms of where are we at and what does this mean, and what has been neglected, what has been focused on. So good. Anyway, I'm going to, I unfortunately have to let you go, but it's been wonderful. It's been great talking with you, Manuela, Dr. Pinto. I will. Thank you so much. Great to hear. I enjoy the remainder of your time in Europe and Germany, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you so much, Nika. It's been wonderful joining this conversation and this podcast. So I'm looking forward to listening.
Absolutely, I'll keep you updated when it's out. It should be fairly soon. So all right,
great.
Take care. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Bye bye.